Have you ever scrolled through your social media feed and felt a pang of envy? A perfect beach, a perfect party, a perfect life, all curated for your consumption. What if you could buy a ticket to that perfection? Now, what if that ticket was a passport to a nightmare, and the beautiful, glamorous party you were promised was a mirage? A lie so spectacular it would become a global symbol of the dark side of our digital world. Our story begins not with a crime, but with a color, a bright, tantalizing shade of orange. In late 2016, this solid orange square began appearing on the Instagram feeds of hundreds of the world's most influential people. It was a cryptic, coordinated post, a digital breadcrumb trail leading to a single, explosive promise: the Fyre Festival, the most exclusive, luxurious, and transformative music festival the world had ever seen. At the center of this whirlwind was a man who embodied the relentless optimism of a tech startup founder. His name was Billy McFarland, a young entrepreneur with a history of ventures aimed at the millennial elite. By his side was his celebrity partner, the rapper Ja Rule. Together, they weren't just planning a festival. They were selling a fantasy, a weekend of escapism for the social media generation. The marketing was a masterpiece of modern influence. A promotional video, shot with breathtaking cinematic quality, showcased a vision of pure hedonism. Supermodels like Bella Hadid and Kendall Jenner frolicked on yachts in turquoise waters, swam with pigs on a sun-drenched beach, and lived a life of impossible beauty. The message was clear. This wasn't just a festival, it was a chance to live inside the advertisement. The location itself was a key part of the myth. The festival was to be held on a private island in the Exumas, a corner of the Bahamas supposedly once owned by the infamous drug lord Pablo Escobar. This detail added a thrilling, dangerous edge to the fantasy. It promised not just luxury, but a story, a legend you could become a part of for one incredible weekend. Tickets sold for thousands, with VIP packages reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The promises were as extravagant as the price tags. Gourmet meals prepared by celebrity chefs, luxurious eco-friendly villas, private jets, and intimate performances from major musical acts. It was billed as the cultural experience of the decade, and the world bought it hook, line, and sinker. But as the glamorous marketing campaign conquered the internet, a very different reality was unfolding behind the scenes. The dream was being built on a foundation of chaos, incompetence, and outright lies. The festival's organizers were not seasoned event producers. They were a small team of young people, swept up in McFarland's messianic vision, with no idea how to execute it. The first lie to crumble was the location. The private island of Pablo Escobar was a fiction. The owners of the island, Norman's Key, kicked the festival out after the organizers broke their promise, not to mention the Escobar connection in their marketing. With just a few months to go, the entire festival had to be moved to a different, undeveloped site on Great Exuma. This new site was not a private paradise. It was a desolate, gravel-filled stretch of land next to a sandals resort. There was no infrastructure, no running water, no electricity, and no housing. The luxurious eco-friendly villas that attendees had paid thousands for were nothing but a concept. The clock was ticking, and the organizers had nothing but an empty lot. The logistical problems were catastrophic. How do you get thousands of people, a massive stage, sound equipment, food, and water to a remote island with limited resources? The organizers, led by the ever-optimistic McFarland, seemed to believe that these problems would simply solve themselves, that their vision alone was enough to bend reality to their will. Desperate for a housing solution, they ordered hundreds of geodesic domes, the kind seen at high-end desert festivals. But what arrived on the island were not luxury domes, but flimsy, white disaster relief tents, the kind used by FEMA in the aftermath of a hurricane. This became a dark, running joke among the beleaguered staff. The promised gourmet catering was another fantasy. The organizers had a contract with a celebrity chef, but as the money began to run out, that deal collapsed. The new catering plan was a local operation, completely unprepared for the scale of the event, with a budget that was a tiny fraction of what would be required to feed thousands of people for a weekend. Money was the heart of the problem. McFarland was a master at raising funds, but he was spending it with a reckless, almost pathological abandon. Millions were spent on the influencer marketing campaign, private jets for the talent, and lavish expenses for the core team, while the crucial, unglamorous work of building the festival site was starved of cash. Experienced event producers were hired and then quit, or were fired after their dire warnings were ignored. They presented McFarland with realistic budgets and timelines, explaining that the festival he had promised was a logistical impossibility. He simply dismissed them, surrounding himself with people who would tell him his dream was still possible. One of the most infamous stories to emerge from this period of desperation involved a senior producer named Andy King. When a crucial shipment of drinking water was held up by Bahamian customs, McFarland suggested King perform oral sex on the customs official to get it released. It was a moment of shocking, bizarre depravity that revealed the moral vacuum at the heart of the operation. In the final days before the festival, it was clear to everyone on the ground that a disaster was imminent. A massive storm hit the island, soaking the disaster relief tents and turning the entire site into a muddy pit. There were not enough toilets, not enough staff, and a growing sense of dread among the local Bahamian workers who had been hired but not yet paid. Yet the lies continued. The festival's social media accounts kept posting beautiful, aspirational content, telling ticket holders to get ready for the weekend of a lifetime. They were actively deleting negative comments and blocking users who were asking legitimate questions about the logistics. The digital mirage had to be maintained at all costs. On the morning of April 27, 2017, the day the festival was set to begin, the organizers made a fateful decision. Instead of canceling the event and admitting defeat, they decided to let the planes take off. They chose to let their customers fly directly into the heart of the nightmare they had created. The first wave of attendees, the social media elite, arrived in the Bahamas expecting paradise. What they got was chaos. Instead of private cars, they were herded onto old-school buses and driven to the festival site. The sense of confusion and unease began to build with every passing mile. When they arrived, the truth was undeniable. The site was a chaotic, half-finished construction zone. The luxury villas were wet, flimsy tents, many of which had not even been set up. Luggage was being unceremoniously dumped from the back of a shipping container in the dark. There was no one in charge, no information, just a growing sense of panic. Then came the food. The promised gourmet meals, the culinary experience of a lifetime, materialized as 2 slices of cheese on untoasted bread, served in a styrofoam container with a limp side salad. A photograph of this sad meal, posted to Twitter, became the viral image that defined the entire catastrophe. It was the moment the digital dream officially died. As night fell, the situation devolved into a scene of pure survival. With no lighting, no security, and dwindling supplies of food and water, the attendees were left to fend for themselves. Tents were looted, fights broke out, and the beautiful people who had come to party were now refugees in a self-inflicted disaster zone. All the musical acts that had been booked, including headliners like Blink-182, had canceled at the last minute, realizing the event was a sham. The music festival had no music. The only sounds were the cries of disillusioned attendees and the howls of stray dogs that roamed the site. The next morning, a frantic, desperate exodus began. Hundreds of attendees rushed to the tiny local airport, trying to get on any flight off the island. They were trapped for hours in the small terminal, with no food, no water, and no answers. The party of the decade had become a hostage situation. The event became a global media spectacle, a real-time implosion documented on social media. The world watched, with a mixture of horror and schadenfreude, as the carefully constructed fantasy of Fyre Festival was torn apart by the brutal, unfiltered reality. The Orange Square had become a symbol of a global joke. The aftermath was a tsunami of legal and financial ruin. Multiple class action lawsuits were filed against McFarland and Ja Rule, seeking more than $100 million in damages. The attendees wanted their money back, but more than that, they wanted accountability for the fraud and the trauma they had endured. The FBI launched a criminal investigation into Billy McFarland. On June 30, 2017, he was arrested and charged with wire fraud. The man whose life had been a performance of limitless success was now facing the grim reality of the federal justice system. In a final, astonishing act of hubris, while out on bail for the Fyre Festival fraud, McFarland started a new scam. He founded a company called NYC VIP Access, selling fraudulent tickets to exclusive events like the Met Gala and the Victoria's Secret fashion show, often to the very same people he had defrauded with Fyre. This new scam led to further fraud charges. The legal noose tightened. In October 2018, a federal judge sentenced Billy McFarland to 6 years in prison. The judge called him a serial fraudster, a man who had betrayed the trust of his investors, his customers, and his employees. The most tragic victims of the scam were not the wealthy ticket holders, but the local Bahamian workers and businesses. Hundreds of laborers had worked tirelessly to build the site, and many were never paid. A local restaurant owner had spent her life savings to cater the event and was left with a devastating, life-altering debt. The legacy of Fyre Festival is far greater than just a failed party. It became a defining cultural moment, a perfect parable for the influencer age. 2 competing, high-profile documentaries were released, turning the organizers and attendees into household names and cementing the festival's place in the annals of pop culture history. The event forced a long-overdue conversation about the ethics of influencer marketing. For the first time, people began to seriously question the glossy, sponsored reality they were being sold on social media. It revealed the immense power of a beautiful image to obscure a rotten truth. It was a story about the intoxicating danger of fake it till you make it, a philosophy celebrated in the startup world. Billy McFarland was not just a con man. He was a true believer in his own hype, a man so convinced of his vision that he ignored every warning, every red flag, until he had flown himself and everyone around him directly into the sun. And so, the ghost of Fyre Festival continues to haunt our digital landscape. It serves as a permanent cautionary tale, a reminder that behind every perfect picture, behind every impossible promise, we must ask a simple question: what's really behind the Orange Square? And are we willing to risk everything to find out?